What's going on, U.S. history kids? We out here, another day, another video. Back in the lab, just grinding, stacking these blue strips. You know what I'm saying? Here's what we're going to talk about today. Second video and a part of this unit. We're talking about striking it rich with that moolah, and we're also going to talk about kind of what it was like to be a worker and workers' rights and the evolution of kind of the idea of the working day and hour and safety that comes about following and kind of really during the Industrial Revolution. We're going to talk about these things throughout the day, and that's going to be the focus of our video. Okay, be on the lookout for your assignment. That's going to be all about workers' rights. You'll see that posted in the classroom on top of this video. Make sure to like and subscribe. Dab, dab, dab. Okay, have I been cringy enough yet? Can I start? Now I can start. Okay. Let's start off here. We're going to talk about what robber barons and captains of industry are. These are really old terms. Do I care if you really know what a robber baron or captain of industry was? Not necessarily, but it's important to just kind of have an idea of who these people were. And that's what we're going to get to in a second. And so we'll paint the picture here. So during the Industrial Revolution, there were a handful of people, not a lot, that they were able to use their skill, resources, connections, what they come from, and ultimately a lot of luck to amass a serious amount of wealth and power that the world has never really seen before, especially from the moolah perspective. These people were referred to as robber barons and captains of industry. They're some of the wealthiest people who have ever lived in the world history. And we're going to talk about a few of them, just so you know kind of the important people. And that's where we're going next. So let's start off with this cat, Cornelius Vanderbilt. Cornelius, not a name you hear often very much. This dude got big. He invested early on, so he put a lot of money into shipping and railroads. Homeboy made moolah. He made bank. Today, he would be worth over $150 billion. That's up there with the Jeff Bezos money, right? Not up there with Mr. Tomei money, but like a little bit below. You know how it is. Vanderbilt today, we see him. He established a pretty big, prestigious university in the South, which is Vanderbilt University. It's a private university in Nashville, Tennessee. It's probably one of the best schools in the South. They have like a big Division I sports program, football team, basketball team, all that stuff. So that's Vanderbilt there. And then the next slide we got here, that's their mascot. If that doesn't scream creepy and crazy, I don't know what does. But yeah, they're the Commodores because that was this guy's nickname. That's a picture of the campus. You can see it's right in downtown. It's a city, which is Nashville. That's in Tennessee. That's kind of like the athletic part of the campus and some of the other parts of the campus. Pretty good university, though. So maybe for those of you who are trying to get away from mom and dad, right, and move out and be 18 and, oh my gosh, set up my dorm, do my vlog, maybe you go to Vanderbilt. Let's talk about a really rich dude. This is John D. Rockefeller. Pretty iconic individual in American history. He's pretty famous because at one point he owned almost all of the American oil companies in what kind of was a monopoly, kind of like a trust. We're going to talk about what that is in a little bit. But pretty much if you wanted to buy gas in America, you had to go through Rockefeller, right? And gas and oil was used in a ton when we were in the Industrial Revolution. This dude was worth over $336 billion. That is insane. That is unreal amount of wealth. That's enough for as many Lamborghinis as you could ever want, right? That dude is rich. That dude could buy countries. He's so rich, right? Today, kind of his legacy is kind of following the breaking up, the splitting up of some of these companies, which we'll talk about a little bit, maybe at the end of the unit. We will, we see today, we see companies like Chevron, Exxon and Mobil. These are companies that were split up. And we're going to talk about why they were split up later. But Rockefeller, pretty important cat. Andrew Carnegie, right? 1835 to 1919. He's another really wealthy dude. He was from Scotland. He got rich by controlling almost all the steel production. He owned U.S. Steel. If you look at that logo, right, that's the same logo as the Pittsburgh Steelers. For those of you that watch football, they got their logo, and it was an homage of the U.S. Steel logo. He was worth about $300 billion. Carnegie was a good guy. He believed the rich should use their money to help the poor. And so that was kind of a lot of like his legacy. He left behind a lot of money, like Carnegie Hall, which is dedicated to like performing arts and music. It's a big part of New York City and stuff and their culture. So Carnegie, pretty important guy. JP Morgan, he's not like the wealthiest of the wealthiest people that we're mentioning, but without him, we probably don't have a lot of the mega companies we do today. He was a smart banker. He was famous for investing in companies that would later become big. This includes General Electric, AT&T. Of course, he started like the JP Morgan and Chase Bank. Chase is one of the biggest banks in America and in the world today. He's a weird looking dude, but he was rich. So good to be him. And then lastly, Henry Ford. He was the guy that really put the automobile on the map. He mass manufactured cars that the average American could afford. The Model T was one of the big ones early on. He was worth about $190 billion. And his legacy is like Ford is one of the biggest car companies in the world. It's arguably the biggest or one of the biggest car companies in America. The Mustang is an iconic American car. So Ford is extremely well known for kind of the way he revolutionized mass manufacturing here in the United States. And so, yeah, pretty important guy. So we're going to shift away from the rich, talking about the rich, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of these workplace definitions, okay? Things I think are important for you to know. Number one, first thing is a monopoly. Monopoly is where one company has full control of an entire industry. Monopolies are problematic and risky and dangerous. Here's why. The best example I can give you is imagine if the only internet or phone providing company service was like Verizon and there was no competition and they didn't have to compete with anyone. If that was the case, Verizon could charge us, the consumers, whatever they wanted because we would have no alternative to go somewhere else. So that would affect us, right? On top of that, Verizon would never have to improve the quality of its product. They wouldn't have to upgrade their internet and Wi-Fi speeds or satellites because, again, we wouldn't have an alternative, right? In a capitalist system, monopolies are feared and they are believed to halt progress. So in the United States, we went after monopolies. We went after Standard Oil and Rockefeller. That's why we split up the oil companies. So we forced Rockefeller to split up his companies. It was a big deal, part of U.S. history, and it really has changed the landscape. So now, today, there really can't be monopolies in any type of industry. As long as there's at least one other competitor in an industry, right, that's good for business because it gives the consumer an alternative choice and it forces each company to be competitive, right? The board game monopoly, think about the entire concept. You're trying to own the entire board. That's how you win the game. Big facts. That's why they pay me the big bucks. Okay, let's talk about a corporation. A corporation is a business that is owned by a ton of investors. So Disney is a corporation. Google is a corporation. These are the mega companies of America and the world that we know of. Corporations get a lot of their money by people like me or other teachers or people like you, right, who invest our money into their company. They use that investment money to help grow, create new products, build new things, et cetera, et cetera. And then, with that investment, they turn around, they make something new, we buy those products. It kind of acts as like in a circle, right? So if you invested in like companies like Amazon, like 20 years ago, Amazon, it didn't cost that much money to buy into Amazon, to invest in Amazon, not that much money. Today, it costs a ton of money to invest in Amazon. 20 years ago, Amazon was nearly bankrupt. So they needed investors to help their company survive and continue to develop and pay their workers. Today, Amazon almost controls the entire planet, right? So the people that invested in Amazon 20 years ago, they're doing really well. They're 100,000-aires, even millionaires, man. You could turn a $1,000, $2,000 investment into 100 grand, right? If you were really a gunner and you put like 10 grand down, you'd probably be a millionaire now with the way Amazon has grown over 20 years, right? That's where stocks come in. So stock is when a company, in this case, a corporation, they sell a percentage of their business to investors. The investors, kind of us, we buy that stock. Think of it as this is a stock, right? And hope that the company will continue to grow so that this stock will become more valuable if we ever choose to sell their stock. There might be 1 million of these stocks out there in the world, right? But this is mine. This is my stock. I own it, right? Again, we'll use the Amazon analogy. Let's say 20 years ago, this one stock right here, this was worth $1. That was the value of it, right? And I decided, okay, I'm going to put my dollar down. I'm going to own this because I believe that Amazon is going to be a super company. And this means that I am a 0.00001% owner in Amazon. And I think Amazon's going to grow and be really big. So I'm going to hold on to this. And so I held on to this for 20 years. And now this is now valued, right? Because everyone wants to be a part owner of Amazon, even if it's only 0.0001%. That's what it means when you invest and buy stock. You're a partial owner. Now everyone wants this, right? But I have it. So if everyone wants it, I can sell it at a higher price. I could flip it, right? I'm trying to give you street hustlers that game. Come on now, this is free game I'm giving you. Now this is worth maybe $1,000, right? Because Amazon is so big and everyone wants to be an owner. I paid $1 for this 20 years ago. I'm about to make $999 off a $1 investment. That's easy money, and I didn't even have to do anything. I just had to buy this for $1, put it in my desk, wait 20 years, pull it out. That's free money. That's free bread. Big facts. Okay, that's what stock is. Unions. A union is like an organized group of labor workers. Unions come about in the Industrial Revolution, and you'll understand why. Because during the Industrial Revolution, working conditions were horrible. They were trash. People were taken advantage of. It wasn't safe. Workers didn't realize their power. And back in those days, since you were doing a very simple task, right, people could get fired. If you didn't like what you had to do, or you were you want to say something back to the boss, you got fired and you got replaced. That's how easy it was back then. Workers realized that if they joined forces together and they formed these groups, these unions, right, they all of a sudden had power, right? That was the point of unions, is that they were going to team up, arm together, stand up for their rights, and they were going to organize different events to go after the owners, the robber barons, the captains of industry, because in those days, that's who held all the power, right? So that's unions. I'm a part of a union, a teacher's union, right? Maybe some of your parents or guardians are a part of unions. Ask them, right? Unions have some power. Probably the most powerful thing that a union can do is go on strike. It's a bargaining method, right? Let's say the teachers, we feel like we're not getting paid enough. If we all in Hayward, in our union, right, we're like, you know what, we're going to go on strike unless you pay us this much more, right? That means all of a sudden there's no teachers. That means you have a bunch of random subs in this classroom that aren't really knowing what they're doing, right? And then parents are going to be mad. They're going to show up to the school board meetings. They're going to be mad at the mayor. They're going to start going after the political officials. And now all of a sudden, the union in this strike, we've put a lot of pressure now and a lot of attention on like the superintendent, the school board people. And so now they got to, make a deal, right? Because otherwise they're going to get in trouble or lose their job. It's the same thing in factories. If you're a part of like an auto union, right? And you're in a factory and you're like, we're not getting paid enough, right? We're going to go on strike. Well, if you're going on strike, that means there's no one to work the factories. If there's no one working the factories, you can't produce cars. That means the owner of that factory or the owner of that company, they're not making money. So a strike is a very powerful bargaining tool. that's used for the workers to give them a little leverage and to give them a little money. So it's important you understand some of these definitions. This is an example of monopoly. I like this. It's like, all these different banks, but one individual owns them. And, he's controlling the bank. He's the one that's working the bank, right? Turning it, making sure it's going. And, he's getting all that money. So let's talk a little bit about limited worker rights. So because workers were so easily replaceable, the owners of production could get away with a lot of unfair things. Workers could be fired for like no reason. Workers could be paid very little, right? And owners didn't have to provide breaks, sick leave, vacation, or a safe work environment, right? This is before unions come about. Workers didn't realize that if they banded together, they had power, right? Some things I want you to think about. So why would owners of production, why would they act like this? What was their motive for treating workers so poorly? So they can make more money, right? If you got to provide higher salaries, that's coming out of, if I'm the owner, that's coming out of my paycheck, right? That's coming out of my wallet. If I got to provide breaks, if I got to provide safer like factories, that's going to cost me more money, right? And I want to be rich. I want to be worth $350 billion, right? That's when you're an owner, right? That's why you're not trying to provide that. So even to this day, there's a constant struggle between the owners and the workers, right? Trying to figure out, right? Both are trying to get their share of the pie, right? So then we get a lot of worker reform that happens in the Industrial Revolution. Towards the end of the 1800s, government stepped in, created a lot of new working laws. Unions were kind of created. So, unions helped to work, would organize strikes and help increase workers' rights. So some of the unions and the laws, the things that happened, like now all of a sudden there's a minimum wage. We still have a minimum wage today. I think here in Hayward, it's like $15 or 12 and a half. It's pretty good. Other places though, it's not as much. A lot more increases in worker safety procedures and the breaking up of monopolies, which was a big one. Things that kind of just get work reform. In fact, we honor the Industrial Revolution, the people who did all these changes to help us, with Labor Day every year. It's in that first Monday in September is Labor Day. Like when we come back to school and you get that 3-day weekend, that's in honor of the workers and workers' rights. It's a day to honor like unions and labors and stuff, right? It's a national holiday. There's other reforms during industrialization that I just want to highlight. A lot of societal changes that drastically changed as a result of the Industrial Revolution. The beliefs around like family life, the role of women, education, science, and art were all impacted by industrialization. We're going to go over a few of these just kind of quickly. So the idea of the new home, this was like the new family life. All of a sudden we go from a society that just needed enough to survive to having materialistic things and owning things and just having a variety of things. So we became much more materialistic. This gave birth to the term domestic life. To be domesticated means to be in a home, right? To be, chilling and not out, on the wild, like a domesticated animal. So all of a sudden, like the idea of owning a home and owning these things, right, became a very popular idea because for the first time, because there was such a mass production of goods, people could buy these things, right? There was enough products available for us to become materialistic. And to this day, we're materialistic. We own all sorts of things that we really don't need, but we feel like we need. You know what I'm saying? Let's go to the next one. The role of woman. Shout out to the ladies in here. Women, kind of their lives have changed too. They went from working in the house to working in factories. And this really flipped the whole idea that, women are below men. A woman can't do a man's job. Women started coming in and they gained power and they said, hey, we can work just as well as the men, if not better. And so a lot of this work that the women did in the Industrial Revolution kind of helped lay the groundwork to increase women's rights over the next century, right? In 1919, women get the right to vote, right? And so, this is right on the tail end of the Industrial Revolution. So, this is big. So there's a lot of female pioneers who really did great things to kind of increase equality between men and women. Even to this day, though, we still got ways to go, right? Women aren't paid the same as men. If you look at the data and evidence, and there's a lot of reasons for that that are kind of tied into like, you know, a lot of sexist beliefs and behaviors in our country and around the world too. Changes in education. This is good for y'all. Education was primitive before the Industrial Revolution. Most kids received little to no schooling. You know, you got enough to learn how to read, maybe write if you were lucky, basic math, but that was it. And mostly if you were wealthy, you got those things. When the Industrial Revolution happened, governments in Europe and in North America, here in the United States, we began investing in education. So now here, kids began receiving a basic public education by teachers who were trained and paid to teach. Colleges and universities also began to open up, especially in the US between 1800 and 1900. So there was a big promotion in education because there was an idea of, okay, you know, we have like this industrial revolution, we have all these things, but we need people that can advance this technology, right? So we need to send our best and brightest, our future generations into the classroom to learn, go off to college, and to continue to improve this technology. Fun fact is, if you look at that picture, that was from over 100 years ago, right? Schooling has not changed that much in over 100 plus years. What we're doing right now is the most drastic shakeup and change in educational history. And I think actually this is really important because a lot of the reasons why sometimes you have failing schools or failing teachers is because we're not changing the game up enough. And so I think this is actually what this social distance education is really going to be good for, at least I hope so, in moving the ball and the needle forward so that you guys can have a better educational experience and that I and others can become better teachers. Changes in science. This is important too, and this is actually where we're going to end on. So we had a lot of discoveries during the Industrial Revolution because of new technologies and new ways of thinking and challenging the old status quo. So like we started discovering atoms. We started thinking about evolution. We started challenging the old ways of thinking where most people thought the earth was like made by a god. Like a lot of people were kind of tied into religion. Charles Darwin, that guy in the top right corner up here, very famous for the term Darwinism. Darwinism is the belief that some species and races are more fit to survive than others. It's kind of a pretty important groundwork for like the theories of evolution. However, Darwinism was problematic. It led to a lot of increased racism in Europe and North America. A lot of the Ku Klux Klan beliefs and like white supremacy beliefs. You know, Darwinism is used as a foundation to where those people think, oh, whites are the most fit to survive than others. These are some of the things that Charles Darwin said, which are kind of wild. Again, he's a guy who's often celebrated in science, but he's like kind of a pretty trash person. So these are some of the things he said. Darwin thought of women were inferior. So he said, a married man is a poor slave, worse than a Negro. So that tells you what he thinks of black people. And that's what he tells you what he thinks of women. He pretty much says, you know, oh, you get married, you know, you're just a poor slave, worse than a Negro because all of a sudden, oh, you're worse than a black man because black men are so bad, right? Or worse than a black individual. It's crazy. These are the things he really said. He also said, at some future period, not very distant as measured by centuries, so soon, the civilized races of man will almost certainly exterminate and replace the savage races throughout the world. By savage, he's talking about the societies of color, right? So Darwin was a pretty big racist. He was a pretty big sexist. He thought obviously pretty horribly of women, anyone of color. But he's also a lot of times like, I don't know, maybe you learned about this in biology or not, maybe when you were younger, but like, you know, we learn about, oh, he's like this guy who figured out evolution, yay, right? And no one ever talks about like the bad things he believed and said in. And so it's tough because that idea of like certain races are better or men are better than women, some people like really believe that and hold that into their hearts. And it's sad, it's tragic. And we got to really try to work on educating people that that's not really true. There's no evidence or science behind that. And so, you know, it's all these things that really come about in the Industrial Revolution that we have to be mindful of. Okay, that's that. I want to get through that very quickly. A lot of information. Make sure you're doing the homework assignment. And with that being said, I will talk to you guys later. Take care.